Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering you've just won the lottery. Suddenly, you're richer than you ever dreamed possible. You immediately quit your stressful job, buy your dream house, travel the world, and surround yourself with every possible luxury. Life feels exhilarating at first, full of excitement, adventure, and non-stop pleasure. But now, fast forward 2 years. You're sitting alone in your huge mansion, surrounded by expensive things, but something doesn't feel right. You still feel empty inside. The parties, the travels, the endless shopping, they no longer excite you. Instead, you're increasingly bored, restless, and even sad. How could it be possible to have everything you've ever wanted, yet still feel deeply unhappy? This scenario isn't merely hypothetical, it's a story repeated time and again, from celebrities to lottery winners who seemingly have it all, yet struggle with intense feelings of emptiness and despair. How can chasing pleasure and happiness lead to such dissatisfaction and unhappiness? This paradox is precisely what philosophers have grappled with for thousands of years through the lens of hedonism. But what exactly is hedonism? At its core, hedonism is the philosophical idea that pleasure is the highest good, the main purpose of human life. However, many people misunderstand hedonism, reducing it to pure indulgence. Images of endless partying, overeating, or reckless behavior spring to mind. But true hedonism isn't merely about excess. Instead, it includes thoughtful approaches such as Epicurean hedonism, which emphasizes moderation, mindfulness, friendship, and simple pleasures. Despite these nuanced interpretations, in today's world, pleasure often becomes distorted into endless consumption, chasing after the next thrill, the newest gadget, or the next exciting experience. As this video will show, when we make pleasure itself the ultimate aim of life, rather than a balanced part of it, we set ourselves up for disappointment and suffering. At first glance, pleasure seems harmless, even healthy. After all, pleasure helps us unwind, motivates us, and enhances our quality of life. Yet paradoxically, if we prioritize pleasure above all else, it can become our greatest source of suffering. Constantly chasing the next dopamine rush, we find ourselves trapped in cycles of diminishing returns. Pleasure begins to feel shallow, fleeting, and unsatisfying. Each high quickly fades, leaving us craving something bigger and better, creating an endless loop of desire and dissatisfaction. We will explore several key questions that will help unravel this pleasure paradox. First, can pleasure actually harm us? Could pursuing happiness too intensely damage our mental health, lead to addiction, or cause emotional burnout? We'll then look deeper into the psychology behind why pleasure doesn't last. Why is it that no matter how thrilling an experience is, we quickly become bored or dissatisfied, eager to chase something else? Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we'll examine what healthier alternatives exist to pure pleasure seeking. If hedonism in its most extreme forms doesn't fulfill us, what can we aim for instead? How can we live happier, more meaningful lives without falling victim to the relentless pursuit of pleasure? By addressing these questions, we'll gain powerful insights into human psychology, philosophy, and well-being. We'll uncover why the most pleasurable path isn't always the happiest one, and why, paradoxically, choosing pleasure wisely and sparingly can bring greater fulfillment than constant indulgence ever could. Together, let's dive into understanding how pleasure works, how it can turn against us, and how we might finally break free from its seductive trap. Hedonism, at its simplest, is the philosophical idea that pleasure is the most important thing in life. But what does that really mean? To fully grasp the depth and nuance of hedonism, we need to journey back to ancient Greece. The word itself comes from the Greek word hedon, which translates directly into English as pleasure or delight. Since its origins, hedonism has fascinated philosophers, guiding their thinking and their lifestyles in profound ways. The basic idea behind hedonism might seem intuitive and even appealing. Pleasure is good, pain is bad, and our lives should be structured to maximize the former and minimize the latter. But as we'll discover, there's much more to this philosophy than first meets the eye. In ancient Greece, two main schools of hedonism emerged, led by two influential philosophers, Aristippus and Epicurus. Aristippus, a student of Socrates, founded what's called Cyrenaic hedonism. Aristippus believed strongly that life is uncertain and fleeting, and thus the only reliable good we have is immediate pleasure. He taught that physical, sensual pleasures such as eating, drinking, comfort, and physical intimacy should be pursued without hesitation. Aristippus encouraged people to fully embrace the present moment and savor the joys immediately available, arguing that tomorrow's happiness is never guaranteed. This approach places emphasis on spontaneity and the senses, suggesting that immediate gratification is the most rational response to life's unpredictability. While this philosophy might sound exciting or liberating, it has been criticized for potentially leading to impulsiveness, short-sightedness, and even self-destructive behavior. On the other hand, Epicurus, perhaps the most famous advocate of hedonism, took a very different approach. Epicurean hedonism is thoughtful, measured, and deeply reflective. Epicurus didn't argue for unlimited indulgence. Instead, he believed the key to lasting happiness was moderation and simplicity. For Epicurus, not all pleasures are equal. Some pleasures, like friendship, peace of mind, intellectual pursuits, and simple comforts, are stable and lasting. Others, particularly extravagant luxuries or uncontrolled sensory experiences, tend to lead to pain or anxiety in the long run. Epicurus argued that the best way to achieve lasting happiness was to thoughtfully select pleasures that don't lead to future suffering, like forming meaningful relationships, engaging in satisfying and stable hobbies, and enjoying simple pleasures, such as a quiet meal shared with friends. This moderate view emphasizes the importance of mental tranquility and long-term happiness, contrasting sharply with Aristippus's immediate gratification mindset. Jumping ahead many centuries to the 18th and 19th centuries, philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill developed these ancient ideas further, creating what became known as utilitarianism. Bentham suggested that pleasure and pain guide all human actions, proposing the famous principle of utility, which states we should strive for the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. Mill, Bentham's student, refined these ideas further, emphasizing the difference between higher and lower pleasures. He famously argued it is better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied, suggesting intellectual and emotional pleasures are superior and more fulfilling than purely physical ones. These philosophical discussions shaped how entire societies view happiness and morality, influencing modern thinking about human rights, ethics, and policy making. To fully understand hedonism, we also need to distinguish between two important forms: psychological hedonism and ethical hedonism. Psychological hedonism is descriptive. It simply observes and describes human behavior. According to psychological hedonism, humans naturally seek pleasure and avoid pain. It's not telling us how we should behave, only how we typically do behave. It's an observation about human nature rather than a moral guideline. Ethical hedonism, on the other hand, is prescriptive. It tells us how we should live our lives. Ethical hedonism argues that because pleasure is good, we ought to actively pursue it and structure our lives around obtaining happiness and avoiding pain. It provides a moral direction, suggesting pleasure is the ultimate criterion for right and wrong actions. Understanding this difference is crucial, as it explains why hedonism can be viewed both as an observation of human psychology and as a guiding principle for how we should live. But why does any of this matter in the modern world? In today's society, hedonistic ideas are everywhere, sometimes explicitly, often subtly influencing our daily choices. Take social media, for example. Platforms like Instagram or TikTok are designed around instant gratification, tapping into our brain's reward system with endless scrolling, constant notifications, likes, comments, and validation. Each dopamine hit from a new follower or viral post delivers immediate pleasure, but it quickly fades, leaving us craving more. This reflects a modern manifestation of Cyrenaic hedonism, prioritizing instant pleasure without deeper thought about long-term consequences. Similarly, consumer culture thrives on this principle. Companies advertise products as keys to happiness, persuading us to chase after the newest gadgets, stylish clothes, or luxury vacations, always promising a joy that rarely lasts. We accumulate objects and experiences in a desperate attempt to capture happiness, but each new purchase becomes ordinary and unsatisfying all too quickly. Conversely, Epicurean hedonism still quietly persists today, offering a calmer and potentially more sustainable approach. Its principles are evident in movements advocating minimalism, mindfulness, or slow living, trends increasingly popular among those overwhelmed by fast-paced modern life. Practices such as meditation, spending quality time with loved ones, cooking a simple homemade meal, or reading a good book emphasize pleasure that's meaningful, lasting, and doesn't depend heavily on external validation. These activities encourage us to slow down, to find fulfillment not in constant novelty, but in stability and simplicity, just as Epicurus taught thousands of years ago. Recognizing how hedonism influences modern life helps us become aware of our unconscious pursuits and allows us to evaluate whether they genuinely lead us toward lasting happiness. These ancient philosophical concepts are not just theoretical, they affect how we use technology, spend money, pursue careers, and even how we structure our relationships. When we see how often society pushes immediate gratification over lasting well-being, we begin to understand why so many people, despite achieving great pleasures and comforts, still feel dissatisfied, empty, or anxious. Understanding these philosophical ideas empowers us to reflect carefully on our own lives and choices, making us better equipped to pursue genuine, sustainable happiness. Have you ever noticed how quickly the excitement from getting something new fades away? Maybe you bought a brand new smartphone, feeling thrilled by its sleek design, fast performance, and amazing camera. At first, it feels incredible, almost magical. But within just a few weeks or maybe even days, it suddenly feels completely normal, almost boring. This is what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, or more popularly, the hedonic treadmill. It describes the tendency for people to quickly return to a stable level of happiness, no matter how positive or negative the event they experience. In simpler terms, we get used to things really fast. Even the greatest pleasures, whether it's a new car, a dream vacation, or landing an amazing job, soon lose their power to make us feel happier. This explains why the happiness we chase never seems to last very long. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon extensively, demonstrating repeatedly how powerful and universal hedonic adaptation really is. In one famous study conducted by psychologists Philip Brickman, Dan Coates, and Ronnie Zimmerman in 1978, researchers compared the happiness levels of lottery winners with those of ordinary people. At first glance, You might think winning millions of dollars would instantly guarantee long-lasting joy. And indeed, initially, the lottery winners reported feeling incredibly happy. But after just a year, researchers found something surprising. These same lottery winners weren't significantly happier than ordinary people who hadn't won anything. In fact, many reported similar or even lower levels of day-to-day happiness. How could that be possible? These winners had become adapted, used to their newfound wealth and lifestyle. The big house, the fancy car, the luxury vacations, all these pleasures had quickly become the new normal, leaving them no happier than they were before they hit the jackpot. This effect isn't limited to lottery winners. Another classic example is people who suddenly become famous or extremely wealthy, like Hollywood celebrities or successful musicians. Initially, fame and wealth seem like the perfect path to everlasting happiness. After all, it looks glamorous from the outside. But countless stories of famous celebrities battling depression, loneliness, and dissatisfaction tell a different story. Despite having millions of fans, endless money, and the freedom to buy almost anything they desire, these individuals often find themselves feeling empty and restless. Why? Because the excitement and novelty of being famous quickly fades away, leaving them trapped in a cycle of chasing the next thrill, the next achievement, or the next high, always hoping to regain that initial sense of joy. Unfortunately, the more we chase after these fleeting pleasures, the quicker we adapt and feel dissatisfied again. The hedonic treadmill doesn't only apply to big events or massive life changes, it impacts even our smallest daily pleasures. Think about something as simple as eating your favorite food. Imagine eating pizza or ice cream every day. The first few times would probably be amazing, delightful, even thrilling. But soon enough, you'd find yourself feeling bored or even sick of it. This quick adaptation means you're constantly seeking something new, different, or more intense just to feel the same level of enjoyment. It's why many of us endlessly scroll through Netflix or social media, always searching for something better. But this constant search rarely leads to satisfaction. It often leads to feelings of restlessness, frustration, and boredom instead. We are constantly chasing happiness, yet happiness seems forever just out of reach. This adaptation mechanism creates a fundamental and challenging problem. No matter how many pleasures we seek or how much happiness we manage to achieve temporarily, we inevitably return to our original state of happiness or unhappiness. Because our baseline happiness tends to remain stable over time, big improvements in our lives provide only short-term boosts in joy. This leaves us constantly feeling like genuine happiness is right around the corner if only we could reach it. So we try to chase pleasure after pleasure, each promising permanent satisfaction, yet each ultimately failing to deliver. This endless cycle of chasing and adaptation creates constant dissatisfaction, always feeling like something essential is missing from our lives, even when we have plenty. Moreover, the hedonic treadmill creates the illusion that happiness is something external, something we can catch or acquire through possessions, achievements, or experiences. We start believing that once we get the next thing, a promotion, a better job, a nicer house, a new relationship, then we'll finally be happy. But every single time, reality proves this idea false. The pleasure quickly fades, and we adapt, resetting our happiness back to baseline. We end up living in a perpetual state of waiting for the next event to finally make us permanently happy. The sad irony is that this illusion prevents us from appreciating what we already have, leaving us stuck in constant dissatisfaction, forever wanting something more, something different, something new. Understanding this treadmill effect can be incredibly valuable because it explains why so many people who seem to have it all remain deeply unhappy. This insight helps us realize that lasting happiness doesn't come from endlessly chasing pleasures or trying to accumulate wealth and possessions. Instead, it suggests happiness might come from something deeper and more stable, something less dependent on changing circumstances or fleeting experiences. By recognizing the existence and power of hedonic adaptation, we can begin to rethink our own pursuit of happiness. We can shift our attention away from external pleasures that quickly fade and towards internal states of contentment and gratitude, which have been shown to resist hedonic adaptation much better. Gratitude, for example, has been studied as a powerful antidote to hedonic adaptation. When we regularly practice gratitude, appreciating the good things we already have, it prevents us from becoming too used to our comforts and pleasures. Rather than always looking for what's next, gratitude helps us truly enjoy and appreciate what's here now. Similarly, mindfulness practices, learning to savor and fully experience pleasures as they happen, can enhance our happiness by slowing down our adaptation. These practices don't eliminate hedonic adaptation entirely, but they significantly reduce its negative effects. By shifting our mindset from constant pursuit to mindful appreciation, we can begin stepping off the treadmill, discovering more lasting happiness in everyday experiences. Ultimately, the hedonic treadmill teaches us a powerful lesson. No amount of external pleasure alone can permanently satisfy us. Pleasure itself isn't inherently bad, but when pleasure-seeking becomes our sole strategy for happiness, we inevitably find ourselves trapped in an exhausting cycle of excitement, boredom, and dissatisfaction. The real challenge and opportunity is finding happiness in ways that don't leave us constantly needing more. To truly understand why chasing pleasure can lead to unhappiness, it's essential to dive into how pleasure actually works in our brains. Pleasure isn't just a vague feeling we experience. It has a real biological basis involving specific chemicals and pathways in our brains. At the heart of this system is dopamine, often called the pleasure neurotransmitter. Dopamine is a chemical messenger produced by our brains that helps neurons communicate with each other. It's deeply involved in how we experience reward, motivation, and pleasure. When something enjoyable happens, whether eating delicious food, watching a funny video, or receiving praise, our brain releases dopamine. This surge of dopamine signals our brain to recognize the activity as rewarding, encouraging us to repeat it in the future. But dopamine isn't just about feeling good, it's also about motivating us. When we anticipate something rewarding, dopamine levels rise, creating excitement and expectation. For instance, imagine seeing your favorite food arriving at your table when you're extremely hungry. Even before taking your first bite, dopamine floods your brain, creating intense anticipation. This anticipation itself feels pleasurable, urging you to take action. Evolutionarily, dopamine served an essential purpose by encouraging behaviors vital for survival, like eating nutritious foods or forming social bonds. However, today, in a world full of instant gratification and endless distractions, this same reward system often leads us into trouble. This powerful reward system is precisely what makes dopamine-driven behaviors potentially dangerous. Because dopamine feels good, we naturally seek experiences or substances that release large amounts of it. Social media platforms, sugary foods, addictive substances like alcohol or drugs, all these things trigger rapid, powerful dopamine surges, making them incredibly appealing and even addictive. For instance, every notification on your smartphone triggers a small dopamine spike in your brain, rewarding you for checking your phone and scrolling through your feed. Over time, your brain starts craving these dopamine hits more and more, creating a powerful loop. Each time you get another like, another message, or see another interesting post, your dopamine levels spike, reinforcing the behavior of constantly checking and scrolling. However, there's a dark side to these dopamine-driven behaviors. The problem begins when our brain adapts to these artificially high levels of dopamine. Remember the hedonic treadmill we discussed earlier? The same thing happens in your brain's reward pathways. Over time, as your brain gets used to these constant dopamine surges, it becomes less sensitive. This is known as tolerance, where your brain gradually requires more intense stimulation to achieve the same pleasure. Consider someone who loves playing video games. Initially, just playing occasionally brings joy, but as they start playing every day for hours, they notice the game isn't as exciting as before. To regain that original excitement, they may start playing even more or looking for more intense games, chasing a high that's increasingly hard to achieve. This cycle of diminishing returns can quickly spiral into addictive or compulsive behaviors. The more dopamine your brain is exposed to, the more it expects, leading you to seek increasingly intense stimuli. This mechanism explains why social media apps are designed with endless scrolling features, colorful visuals, and rapid-fire rewards, each feature specifically engineered to maximize dopamine release and keep users hooked. It also explains substance addiction, why people become dependent on alcohol, nicotine, or drugs. The brain demands ever-increasing amounts just to feel normal, let alone good. When dopamine levels drop below these artificially elevated baselines, individuals experience withdrawal, feelings of anxiety, sadness, emptiness, or depression, driving them to desperately seek another hit. In fact, psychological studies provide clear evidence of this phenomenon. In experiments involving animals, researchers found that rats would repeatedly press levers to stimulate dopamine release in their brains, often ignoring food, water, or even sleep to keep getting dopamine hits. This alarming behavior illustrates just how powerful dopamine-driven pleasure-seeking can become, even leading animals and humans to neglect their basic needs. Similarly, human studies involving smartphone use demonstrate how dopamine shapes behavior. Notifications trigger measurable spikes in dopamine, reinforcing constant checking and scrolling, resulting in addictive patterns similar to substance abuse. Over time, chasing dopamine leads to more severe consequences than just diminishing returns. It can contribute to serious mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Here's how. As dopamine levels become increasingly hard to maintain, the contrast between high dopamine states and low dopamine states grows larger. When you stop engaging in dopamine-driven activities, like putting down your phone or ending a gaming session, dopamine levels fall dramatically, leaving you feeling empty, anxious, or depressed. This cycle reinforces a compulsive pattern. Returning to the dopamine-triggering behavior becomes the only way to temporarily relieve negative feelings, further deepening addiction and emotional instability. A real-world example of dopamine-driven problems is the rise in anxiety and depression among heavy social media users. Research consistently shows a strong link between extensive social media use and declining mental health, particularly among teenagers. A study published in the journal Computers and Human Behavior in 2017 demonstrated that individuals who checked social media more frequently throughout the day reported significantly higher levels of anxiety and dissatisfaction with life. Each notification provided a brief dopamine spike, but when these notifications stopped or slowed down, participants experienced increased anxiety and feelings of worthlessness, reinforcing the addictive cycle. Understanding dopamine's role in pleasure helps us recognize why simply pursuing pleasure endlessly often backfires. Pleasure-seeking behaviors, especially those driven by rapid dopamine hits, like constantly refreshing social media feeds, binge-watching TV, overeating sugary foods, or abusing addictive substances, become self-defeating. Rather than delivering lasting satisfaction, they create ever-increasing cycles of craving, disappointment, and emotional distress. What initially seems pleasurable quickly becomes compulsive, ultimately robbing us of real joy and peace of mind. However, there's hope. By becoming aware of dopamine's influence, we can consciously break free from these destructive cycles. Practices like digital detoxes, intentionally limiting smartphone and social media usage, have proven effective in restoring dopamine sensitivity and improving emotional stability. Activities that naturally regulate dopamine, such as exercise, meditation, or engaging in meaningful hobbies, help rebuild healthier reward pathways, reducing compulsive behaviors, and improving overall mental well-being. Psychologists and neuroscientists emphasize that achieving lasting happiness isn't about chasing dopamine highs. It's about understanding and managing our brain's reward system, making thoughtful choices about where we seek pleasure, and building healthier, more sustainable habits. By better understanding the neuroscience of pleasure, we become empowered to make wiser decisions that lead not just to temporary highs, but to lasting satisfaction and genuine happiness. In today's world, it often feels like we're constantly being told we must always feel happy, cheerful, and optimistic, no matter what. Everywhere we look, especially on social media, we see smiling faces, perfect lives, incredible vacations, and seemingly flawless relationships. This creates an impression that happiness isn't just desirable, it's practically mandatory. We live in a culture obsessed with feeling good, creating immense pressure to maintain a constant state of positivity. This idea that we should always be happy, optimistic, and joyful, even when we're facing difficult or painful situations, is what psychologists call toxic positivity. It might seem harmless or even helpful at first. After all, isn't positivity supposed to be a good thing? But in reality, this relentless demand for positivity often ends up doing more harm than good. Social media plays a huge role in perpetuating this unrealistic standard. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook are filled with highly edited snapshots of people's best moments. We rarely see the struggles, disappointments, or setbacks behind these perfect-looking images. Instead, what we witness daily are curated glimpses of happiness. People on luxurious vacations, friends laughing together at stylish cafes, couples sharing romantic moments, or influencers showcasing their amazing lives. When we constantly see others seemingly thriving, we naturally begin to compare our real lives, full of ups and downs, boredom, stress, and sadness, with their idealized highlights. This comparison can create immense pressure, convincing us that anything less than constant happiness means we're somehow failing or falling short. The reality, though, is that what we see online isn't real life. It's carefully selected and edited moments, masking deeper truths and struggles everyone inevitably faces. This unrealistic expectation to always feel happy can have serious consequences for our mental health and well-being. When we internalize the idea that we must always be positive, we often start feeling guilty or ashamed whenever we experience negative emotions. Sadness, anxiety, frustration, loneliness, all these completely natural emotions begin to feel unacceptable or wrong. Rather than acknowledging and exploring our feelings, we try to push them away or hide them, pretending they don't exist. For example, imagine you're feeling sad after a breakup or anxious about an upcoming test. Rather than expressing your true feelings or seeking comfort, you might find yourself saying things like, "I shouldn't feel this way," or "others have it much worse." You might even fake smiles or pretend to be okay just to avoid showing vulnerability or negativity. This emotional suppression doesn't eliminate negative feelings. It only buries them deeper, where they continue to cause harm. Psychological research has repeatedly shown that suppressing or ignoring negative emotions can lead to more severe mental health issues, including anxiety disorders, depression, and chronic stress. Emotions don't simply disappear because we choose to ignore them. Instead, they build up over time, causing emotional exhaustion, burnout, or even physical illness. Consider a student who struggles with schoolwork or friendship issues but constantly forces themselves to appear cheerful and positive. Rather than seeking support, They might hide their true feelings behind smiles or forced positivity, afraid they'll disappoint others or be judged for expressing genuine sadness or stress. Over time, this student might become emotionally overwhelmed, isolated, or deeply unhappy, precisely because they felt unable or unwilling to openly acknowledge and confront their true feelings. Toxic positivity also damages our relationships. When we refuse to acknowledge or validate negative feelings, either our own or others, we make genuine emotional connections difficult. Imagine telling a friend about feeling sad or overwhelmed only to hear responses like, "Just cheer up," or "You have nothing to be sad about." Rather than feeling comforted, you might feel dismissed, misunderstood, or even more isolated. Genuine relationships depend on emotional honesty and vulnerability, being willing to share and support each other through difficult emotions, not just the easy ones. By creating an environment where negative emotions are ignored or judged, toxic positivity prevents meaningful, authentic connections from forming, leaving us feeling increasingly lonely and disconnected. So what's the healthier alternative? Instead of pretending negative feelings don't exist or viewing them as shameful, it's crucial to recognize them as completely natural and necessary parts of human experience. Sadness, anxiety, anger, and disappointment aren't signs of weakness or failure. They're simply human emotions that everyone experiences. Each of these emotions serves an important purpose. Sadness helps us process loss and disappointment. Anxiety alerts us to possible threats or challenges. Anger helps us set boundaries or address unfair treatment, and disappointment helps us learn and grow from mistakes. Ignoring or suppressing these emotions denies us valuable insights and growth opportunities. Accepting negative emotions doesn't mean we should dwell on them indefinitely or become overwhelmed by them. It simply means acknowledging their existence openly and honestly, giving ourselves permission to feel, express, and process these feelings in healthy ways. Research has shown that practicing emotional acceptance, allowing ourselves to genuinely experience and express emotions without judgment, actually reduces anxiety and depression, increases emotional resilience, and improves overall mental health. People who embrace emotional authenticity report stronger relationships, greater personal growth, and higher life satisfaction compared to those who engage in toxic positivity. Practically, emotional acceptance involves simple but powerful steps. For example, next time you feel sad or anxious, instead of immediately trying to dismiss or hide these feelings, pause and allow yourself to recognize them. Ask yourself, what am I really feeling right now? Why might I feel this way? Simply naming and validating your emotions can significantly reduce their intensity and help you better understand yourself. It's also helpful to communicate your feelings honestly with someone you trust, such as a friend, family member, or counselor. Sharing negative emotions openly, rather than hiding behind forced positivity, creates opportunities for genuine connection, support, and emotional relief. By understanding that negative emotions are normal, healthy, and necessary, we free ourselves from the pressure of constant positivity. Embracing emotional authenticity helps us build stronger connections, better mental health, and deeper self-awareness. Remember, true happiness isn't about always feeling good. It's about fully experiencing life's ups and downs, learning to manage emotions healthily, and building genuine, meaningful relationships along the way. Throughout history, philosophers have often raised important critiques about the pursuit of pleasure as life's main goal. Among these critics, Friedrich Nietzsche stands out for his provocative and compelling views. Nietzsche believed strongly in personal growth, strength, and resilience. and he famously argued that constantly chasing pleasure and comfort could actually weaken us. His famous quote, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger," isn't just a catchy phrase. It represents Nietzsche's deeper belief that challenges, struggles, and even pain are crucial to our development and growth as individuals. According to Nietzsche, confronting hardships directly and overcoming difficulties builds inner strength, wisdom, and character. On the other hand, constantly seeking easy pleasures and avoiding discomfort at all costs prevents us from ever truly developing as human beings. Nietzsche warned about the dangers of comfort and ease, calling them traps that hinder our ability to become better, stronger, and wiser. When we continuously avoid anything challenging or uncomfortable, choosing instead immediate, easy pleasures, we become weak, passive, and dependent. We lose our ability to handle difficult situations effectively, becoming easily frustrated or overwhelmed whenever life doesn't go according to plan. Consider someone who never leaves their comfort zone. Perhaps they always stay in familiar places, refuse to try new things, or avoid any activities that seem difficult or uncomfortable. Initially, their life might feel safe and pleasant. However, over time, this comfortable existence becomes limiting, empty, and ultimately unsatisfying. They never develop new skills or abilities, never discover their full potential, and rarely experience the deep satisfaction that comes from genuinely overcoming challenges. For Nietzsche, this kind of life, defined by constant comfort and ease, wasn't truly living at all. Nietzsche also believed that real fulfillment and happiness come from pursuing meaningful goals and overcoming genuine obstacles, not merely seeking endless pleasures. True satisfaction, according to him, arises when we set challenging goals for ourselves, experience setbacks or difficulties along the way, but persevere and ultimately succeed. This kind of pleasure, the pleasure of accomplishment, growth, and self-improvement, is far deeper and more lasting than mere comfort or sensory enjoyment. Nietzsche's ideas suggest that by embracing difficulties rather than avoiding them, we not only become stronger, more capable individuals, but also experience more genuine happiness in the long run. Instead of chasing fleeting pleasures, Nietzsche encourages us to find pleasure in personal growth, in becoming someone stronger, wiser, and better each day. Interestingly, Nietzsche's views share some similarities and important differences with another influential philosophical tradition, Stoicism. The Stoics, ancient philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, held their own powerful critiques of pleasure. While Nietzsche emphasized personal growth through overcoming struggles, the Stoics believed that pleasure itself could become dangerously enslaving. They warned that constantly chasing pleasurable experiences inevitably leads to emotional dependence and loss of self-control. The Stoics argued that becoming overly attached to pleasures, whether comfort, wealth, status, or sensory experiences, ultimately robs us of true freedom and independence. For the Stoics, real happiness doesn't come from external pleasures, but rather from inner virtue, wisdom, and emotional resilience. One key Stoic insight is their belief that happiness shouldn't depend on external circumstances, things we can't fully control, such as possessions, popularity, or physical pleasures. Instead, the Stoics insisted that genuine happiness must come from within, from developing virtues like courage, wisdom, moderation, and self-discipline. By cultivating these virtues, we free ourselves from relying on pleasure or external rewards to feel good. Imagine someone who is genuinely happy, content, and fulfilled regardless of whether they experience pleasure or discomfort. Such a person would remain calm, steady, and balanced even in challenging or uncomfortable situations, because their happiness isn't dependent on external conditions. The Stoics believed that cultivating this internal independence and emotional stability is the true path to lasting happiness. Both Nietzsche and the Stoics, despite their differences, offer incredibly valuable insights into overcoming harmful pleasure-seeking habits. Nietzsche challenges us to see discomfort and struggle as opportunities for growth rather than as threats to avoid. This perspective helps us redefine what pleasure really means, shifting our focus from immediate gratification to long-term growth and satisfaction. The Stoics, meanwhile, encourage us to develop internal emotional strength and resilience rather than becoming enslaved by external pleasures. By embracing Stoic wisdom, we can learn to appreciate life's pleasures without becoming overly dependent on them. Both philosophies remind us that real happiness doesn't come from simply experiencing more and more pleasures, but from becoming better, wiser, stronger individuals. Consider, for instance, a high school student preparing for a challenging test. A purely pleasure-seeking approach might lead them to avoid studying altogether, opting instead for immediate pleasures like gaming, watching videos, or chatting with friends. While enjoyable in the short term, this approach eventually leads to disappointment, anxiety, and regret when they perform poorly. Nietzsche would encourage the student to embrace the challenge of studying hard, recognizing that the temporary discomfort of hard work ultimately leads to lasting pleasure and pride when they succeed. Similarly, a Stoic approach would encourage the student to cultivate inner discipline, reminding them that real happiness comes from developing virtues like wisdom, self-control, and resilience, not simply from immediate gratification. Applying these philosophical perspectives in daily life means actively choosing meaningful challenges, even when they're difficult or uncomfortable, because we recognize their potential to help us grow. It also means cultivating virtues like courage, wisdom, and moderation, which protect us from becoming overly dependent on external pleasures. Rather than constantly chasing after temporary happiness, we can choose to invest in ourselves, focusing on long-term growth and emotional stability. Both Nietzsche and the Stoics encourage us to redefine our relationship with pleasure, not as something to pursue endlessly, but as something to appreciate mindfully, selectively, and in balance with other important aspects of life. By understanding and integrating these philosophical critiques into our lives, we gain powerful tools to overcome harmful pleasure-seeking behaviors. Nietzsche reminds us that genuine happiness often involves embracing challenges and discomforts as opportunities for growth. The Stoics remind us of the importance of inner virtue and emotional independence. Both perspectives help us break free from the endless, exhausting cycle of chasing pleasure, guiding us toward deeper, more lasting forms of happiness. Ultimately, these philosophical insights teach us that true fulfillment comes not from avoiding discomfort, but from confronting it courageously, thoughtfully, and purposefully, transforming life's inevitable struggles into meaningful opportunities for personal growth and happiness. If chasing constant pleasure isn't the answer to true happiness, then what is? Philosophers and psychologists have explored this question extensively, proposing alternative paths that offer more sustainable, deeper, and lasting forms of fulfillment. One of the most powerful alternatives to pure hedonism is an ancient Greek concept known as eudaimonia. Unlike pleasure-based happiness, eudaimonia emphasizes finding happiness through meaningful living, pursuing personal growth, developing inner virtues, and contributing positively to the world around us. Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of ancient Greece, believed that true happiness comes from living a life filled with purpose and meaning, where we actively strive to become better human beings and cultivate virtues like courage, wisdom, compassion, and integrity. Eudaimonia isn't about always feeling good or experiencing endless pleasure. Rather, it's about having a sense of purpose, fulfillment, and genuine satisfaction that comes from engaging in meaningful activities, that align with our deepest values and strengths. Another balanced approach to happiness comes from the philosophy of Epicurus, whom we briefly discussed earlier. Epicurean philosophy emphasizes simplicity, moderation, mindfulness, and cultivating meaningful relationships. Epicurus taught that genuine pleasure isn't about extravagance or endless sensory experiences. Instead, it's about appreciating life's simplest joys, sharing meals with good friends, spending quiet moments in nature, or engaging in thoughtful reflection. Epicurus believed that moderation is crucial to happiness because excessive pleasure-seeking always leads to anxiety, disappointment, and ultimately unhappiness. By living simply, practicing mindfulness, and focusing on meaningful relationships rather than material possessions or immediate thrills, we can experience lasting contentment and emotional peace. Modern psychology supports this Epicurean approach, consistently finding that individuals who live simpler, more mindful lives, prioritizing relationships and meaningful experiences, report greater overall happiness and emotional well-being. But how can we practically apply these ideas in everyday life? One of the simplest yet most powerful practices supported by modern psychology is mindfulness. Mindfulness involves actively paying attention to the present moment, fully experiencing each sensation, emotion, and thought without judgment. Mindfulness exercises, such as deep breathing, meditation, or simply taking moments to slow down and consciously savor daily experiences, help us escape the trap of constantly seeking external stimulation and pleasure. For example, instead of quickly devouring a meal while distracted by phones or TV, mindfulness encourages us to truly savor each bite, appreciating the flavors, textures, and sensations. This practice not only enhances immediate pleasure, but also helps prevent us from endlessly chasing new fleeting pleasures. Research shows mindfulness significantly improves emotional health, reducing anxiety, depression, and stress, while enhancing feelings of genuine happiness, contentment, and emotional resilience. Another practical step toward balanced happiness is pursuing meaningful, long-term goals rather than immediate pleasures. Meaningful goals give our lives direction, purpose, and a sense of accomplishment that far surpasses temporary pleasures. Unlike short-term pleasures, meaningful goals often require patience, persistence, and delayed gratification, qualities that build character, emotional resilience, and lasting happiness. Imagine someone working consistently toward mastering a musical instrument, completing a difficult educational program, or training for a marathon. Although these activities might not always feel pleasurable in the moment, they can involve frustration, setbacks, or fatigue. The deeper satisfaction and pride that come from achieving these long-term goals provide lasting joy and fulfillment. Psychological research confirms that people who regularly pursue and achieve meaningful goals report significantly higher levels of happiness, emotional stability, and satisfaction with life than those who focus solely on immediate pleasures. Building authentic, meaningful relationships is another critical component of balanced happiness. Humans are deeply social beings, and meaningful connections with others provide emotional support, happiness, and a sense of belonging that no amount of material or sensory pleasure can match. Authentic relationships require vulnerability, emotional honesty, and genuine care, qualities often absent in superficial interactions centered only around immediate pleasures. Practically, building meaningful relationships means actively investing time and effort into friendships, family relationships, and communities. It involves expressing emotions honestly, listening compassionately, supporting others during difficult times, and celebrating shared joys and achievements. Numerous psychological studies confirm the importance of meaningful relationships. Individuals who maintain strong social bonds consistently report higher emotional resilience, happiness, and life satisfaction than those who remain isolated or rely solely on superficial interactions or digital connections. In recent decades, positive psychology, a scientific field dedicated to understanding happiness and well-being, has provided substantial evidence supporting these balanced approaches. Positive psychologists like Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi discovered that lasting happiness doesn't come primarily from pleasure or material wealth. Instead, their research emphasizes concepts like meaning, engagement, and authentic relationships. Seligman identified three critical components of lasting happiness: positive emotions, enjoying life's pleasures in moderation; engagement, deeply involved in meaningful activities or experiences; and meaning, actively contributing to something bigger than ourselves. Similarly, Csikszentmihalyi's research into flow states, moments when people become completely absorbed in challenging, meaningful activities, demonstrates that people experience deep satisfaction and lasting happiness through meaningful engagement rather than passive pleasures. Furthermore, numerous studies validate Epicurean-style simplicity and mindfulness. Research consistently demonstrates that excessive consumption and materialism, endless buying, accumulating possessions, or seeking extravagant pleasures are strongly linked to anxiety, dissatisfaction, and decreased happiness. Conversely, individuals who practice moderation, live simply, and regularly practice mindfulness report significantly greater emotional well-being, contentment, and life satisfaction. Studies confirm that mindfulness practices reduce stress, improve emotional regulation, and even change brain structures related to emotional resilience and positive emotional states. Ultimately, these balanced approaches, rooted in philosophy and supported by modern psychology, offer practical, effective ways to experience genuine, lasting happiness. By focusing less on immediate pleasures and more on meaningful living, eudaimonia, moderation, mindfulness, long-term goals, and authentic relationships, we build lives rich in genuine fulfillment, emotional resilience, and lasting joy. Pleasure itself remains valuable, but only when balanced carefully with deeper forms of happiness. Through mindful, meaningful engagement with life, guided by wisdom from Aristotle, Epicurus, and contemporary psychological research, we achieve not just momentary pleasure, but true emotional depth, lasting satisfaction, and genuine happiness. Throughout this video, we've explored an important but often misunderstood idea that pleasure, while essential to life, cannot alone guarantee lasting happiness. We've seen how chasing endless pleasure, whether through social media, material possessions, or immediate sensory gratification, often leads not to joy, but instead to dissatisfaction, anxiety, addiction, and even emotional emptiness. Pleasure, as we've discovered, is a wonderful part of life, but when we make it our ultimate goal, we quickly find ourselves trapped on the hedonic treadmill, always chasing happiness, yet never truly capturing it. We've learned about the neuroscience behind pleasure, recognizing that dopamine-driven behaviors can rapidly spiral into compulsive, addictive patterns, making genuine happiness even harder to achieve. Real-world examples from celebrities and historical figures to ordinary individuals vividly illustrated how excessive pleasure-seeking often results in broken relationships, depression, and existential suffering. Philosophers like Nietzsche and the Stoics taught us that comfort and immediate gratification might feel good momentarily, but they rarely contribute to real growth, resilience, or lasting happiness. Instead, these thinkers encouraged us to confront life's challenges courageously and to cultivate inner virtues and meaningful goals that bring deeper, more sustainable joy. Moreover, we've explored healthier, balanced alternatives to pure hedonism, such as Aristotle's idea of eudaimonia or meaningful living, and Epicurean principles of moderation, mindfulness, and authentic relationships. Modern psychological research clearly supports these balanced approaches, showing us that lasting happiness comes from purposeful engagement in life, meaningful pursuits, and genuine emotional connections. We've learned practical strategies like mindfulness exercises, pursuing meaningful long-term goals, and investing in authentic relationships, each of which helps create genuine emotional stability and satisfaction. Now, after this exploration, I invite you to take a moment to critically reflect on your own concept of pleasure and happiness. Consider honestly, are your current strategies for happiness truly making you happier, or are they trapping you in endless cycles of craving, dissatisfaction, and emotional emptiness? Are the pleasures you chase genuinely fulfilling, or are they simply temporary distractions from deeper emotional needs? Reflecting deeply on these questions is the first step toward breaking free from harmful pleasure-seeking habits and discovering deeper, lasting forms of joy. Remember, happiness isn't about eliminating pleasure. It's about balancing pleasure thoughtfully and wisely with other vital aspects of life, meaning, personal growth, and authentic human connections. Pleasure becomes most satisfying not when we pursue it endlessly, but when we experience it mindfully, moderately, and in alignment with our deeper values and purposes. True happiness emerges not from constant stimulation, but from inner peace, genuine engagement with life, and meaningful relationships. The challenge I leave you with today is this. What if the path to real happiness isn't chasing pleasure, but understanding it, moderating it, and ultimately transcending it? Imagine what your life could look like if you chose to pursue happiness differently, if you embraced discomfort as an opportunity for growth, cultivated meaningful relationships over superficial connections, and prioritized purpose and meaning above instant gratification. Imagine discovering a deeper, more sustainable joy that doesn't depend solely on external circumstances but comes from within. This journey toward balanced happiness and fulfillment won't always be easy, but it promises rewards far richer and more lasting than any temporary pleasure. So take this insight with you today. Pleasure has its place, but it is not everything. Seek balance, choose wisely, and remember that true happiness, lasting happiness, is not found by endlessly chasing pleasure, but by thoughtfully embracing it, moderating it, and ultimately moving beyond it.